What is Maundy Thursday? We often associate it with the Last Supper, with the institution of the Lord's Supper. We associate it with Jesus washing the disciples' feet. But what about the word Maundy itself? Anybody have any idea of what does Maundy mean? We have that word every time each year for this Thursday. Derived possibly from the Old French Monday, itself likely from the Latin mandatum. The English word we have derived from this is mandate. So thus we have the Latin phrase mandatum novum, or a new commandment. So it is this mandate, this commandment that Jesus says, I give you this new mandatum, this new mandate, this new commandment, he says to the disciples, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. Well, what does this look like to love the way Jesus loves? It may be a simple thing to ask, but do we really see and experience that very often in the world around us and really in ourselves with the radical love that Jesus has? How do humans tend to respond to each other when one human has absolute power? How has that gone in our human history in various nations and kingdoms? There's a reason for the saying, absolute power corrupts. And how do people respond when they're leaving someplace and knowing that they will never be back? It's true that some people in these situations offer hugs and tears, well wishes, and quality time. But what about when there is adversity, disagreement, and pain? Although it seems cruel, and I've hated this over the years too, and I'm worrying about this for Dina's job as well sometimes, but there's a reason why so many corporations escort employees out of the building the very same day and sometimes the very same hour that they're told they will be let go. There have just been too many who have become immediately disgruntled, who burn bridges, who sabotage, and purposely cause havoc in the workplace when they leave. Good thing this never happens when anyone leaves the church. For the disgruntled employee, their very goal becomes damage. Therefore, corporations engage in what they aptly call damage control. Preemptively, as harsh as it may seem. Each side has great potential of doing harm and being harsh to the other once it's decided that their time together is coming to an end. Now that happens in all kinds of human relationships. Marriages, friendships, in neighborhoods and churches, all over the place. Sometimes with families and siblings. Each side has the potential of being very harsh to the other when it's decided that their time together is coming to an end. I think this is why when I was growing up in North Carolina, that so many people driving their cars were willing to say so many things. And then when I was growing up, there was more times without AC, windows were down more often, little country roads, you'd see each other, you'd stop in their stoplights. And some people would say things to other drivers when they got mad at them that I think they never would have said if they realized they'd be going to the same parking lot or getting out of the car at the same time or going to the same store. But they had a different idea when they figured this is the last time I'll ever see this person. So and it goes from there. Some of this changed once road rage and shooting started. Didn't happen as much in cars, but it took over even way more online, with harsh words said, where people are even more removed from each other and never even see each other through a window or a glass. And saying goodbye indefinitely on social media seems as tempting as just being able to press a button or swipe a phone. It can be very tempting and easy to put something in there really harsh before that touch or swipe comes. So why am I talking about how people respond to other people with absolute power? And how people also respond in situations where they leave and they're perceiving their actions won't have consequences because they're leaving and they know they won't be coming back. It's because this is the exact scenario in the gospel today for Jesus. Listen again to verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God. Did you hear that? Knowing that all things were in his hands, absolute power, and that he would be going back to God, leaving. And in fact, it's even more blunt in verse 33 today, that Jesus reminds them, where I am going, you cannot come. So what does Jesus do? Leaving soon to a place where none could follow, and knowing he had absolute power right there in his hands. What would you do if that were you? What would you do with absolute power and knowing you're about to go? And knowing also what the people in that room were about to do too, and to leave you alone, and one of them to betray you. Here's what Jesus did. Jesus got up from the table, took off his outer robe, tied a towel around himself, poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the very towel that was tied around him. He served them. He loved them by serving, and even modeled for them to reach out to each other in serving and giving and loving. Instead of burning bridges and sabotaging, he lifted them up and gave a legacy of love that we carry on right here and now with this table. He broke bread and lifted a cup, feeding and nourishing them, the same ones he knew would abandon him at the cross, the same one who was about to betray him right then. This is my body, given for you, Jesus says. This is my blood, shed for you. And they did not understand, not until much later. Yet he gave both his body and his blood that night and at the cross, even to the one that he knew was about to betray him. And at that cross, and that night, the gifts he gave were selfless love, forgiveness of sins that we could never reconcile ourselves. And he also gave what no human power could ever give, everlasting life and everlasting love. On Maundy, Thursday, this is what we remember and honor: the selfless servanthood and love of Jesus, that even in his final hours, he leads by serving at the table and at his followers' feet. Fed and nourished at this table, what will we do with this gift, this mandatum, this mandate given to us to love one another? For like every mandate, every mandatum, for every commandment from our loving God, this command also is for us and for our sake. God doesn't need this command. We do. That it may go well with us, that we might have life abundantly, that we might be saved and live with meaning and purpose and depth and fullness together. What will you do with the power that you've been given? We all only have a brief time on this earth. How will you serve? How will you love? What example of Jesus, what legacy of Christ do you hope to leave? Tonight is the first step for the rest of our lives. We, the disciples, the followers of today, who are given the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, we who are washed and forgiven in the waters of baptism, we who receive forgiveness in the confession of sin, we who have been first loved by God, even in the womb before we were born, we who are cherished by a saving God who knows every single hair on our head. We remember this night in the stripping of the altar, all this, and also the message that having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. You are loved. You are cherished. You have been washed clean. You are invited to the feast. You are lifted up. Tonight is the first step of the rest of our lives. Fed and nourished at the table of our life-giving Lord, what will you do with this mandatum, this command, this gift to love one another as Jesus loves us?